Good morning. I'm Sharyn Sarner. We're at the JCC in Stamford, Connecticut. It's Thursday, May the 22nd, 2014, and on behalf of the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County, I am interviewing Frank George about his personal history. Good morning, Frank.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Glad to be here.
Good. First of all, let's start with the beginning. Tell us where you were born and when you were
I
born.
was born on March 27, 1921,
And where?
in Breslau. It's called in German Breslau, which is the capital of Silesia. And then it was, at that time, I believe it was occupied by the French because Germany had lost World War I. And my parents had just gotten married there, and my father was a newspaperman, journalist. He was covering the French occupation of Germany for a Berlin paper. So they were on their honeymoon there, and obviously it was somewhat unexpected that I would be born there because I never went back there when I was an adult, or well, maybe I was, but
Who were your parents? What were their
Okay.
names?
my father's name is Manfred George. He is a writer, editor, newspaperman, wrote books like the biography of Theodor Herzl, and his original name, family name, was Cohn. His father's name is Cohn, C-O-H-N, and his middle name was George. And it was 21. He dropped the last name. There really was no major anti-Semitism at the time, but it seemed like a good pseudonym for him to use his middle name in his professional career as a newspaper man. So that's how he wound up with George, and George is spelled without the E in German. And my name, my E, only got to me during World War II. If at some point they added it because it kept getting too complicated to keep spelling my name without the E when I was in this country, in the army and so on. It got too difficult getting married without an E on a George. So,
And who was your mother?
my mother's name was Hannah Simon. Her father's name was Ludwig Simon, who was a private banker in Berlin. And he was not very good at business, but his relatives, our relatives on his side of the family, were very wealthy. He barely belonged in there for some reason, I don't know, but they owned the major department stores in Berlin, and they were very good to me to help me get to America. The name was Grünfeld in German, Grünfeld, and they owned in Silesia linen factories. That they made the best bedclothes linen that anybody could buy in Germany. So they were well off. They worked hard. So that's the Cohns and the Simons are my background, and I didn't wind up with Cohn because my dad, they changed their name to George from the very beginning.
Right. Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I did. Yes. A sister.
And was she
3
younger?
months. Yeah,
Younger?
3 months younger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about your
The
early...
interesting thing about the Jewish aspect of it is My sister died 3 years ago in New York, and her last name is O'Sullivan, which is as Irish as you can get. So they talk about Jewish history, and I talked to her husband, every night. I talked to him. He lives by himself in Manhattan, and he's 88 now. And we are good friends, but
That's
I don't
nice.
go into the city anymore, so
Yeah.
that's how that is.
That's nice. So tell us about your childhood.
Childhood in Berlin. So my folks obviously they had moved to Berlin from Breslau, and my father worked for a publishing company, for a newspaper, a big publishing company, and if you were a writer for a daily paper, the paper gets printed at night. You can't be very far away from the office, and my mother's father lived in the suburb, so they did not live together. He had to live in the city of Berlin, and this was 3/4 of an hour in the suburb of Berlin, where I grew up. And let's see how fast you could jump ahead to
That's okay.
what happens next. I remember my childhood. The place is called Lichterfelde West. At that time, it was reached by bus and streetcar and an elevator. It was really quite far out from the center, but not too far from the zoo and botanical garden, which was beautiful. So this is I'm growing up now in 1923, I was born in 21. In my grandfather's house. Now, there was no wife. His wife lived in town, and she was related to the wealthy department store owners. And my mother lived with my grandfather in my grandfather's house, but I didn't see her very often. My memory is very brief of that. But I grew up there, and I went to the grammar school, and in 1999, which isn't that long ago, the mayor of Berlin invited us to visit Berlin at their expense, because of course they had, killed a lot of our relatives and so on, and they paid for my wife and my hotel, and we went back to where I grew up. In fact, it was pretty amazing that when we went back to Berlin, I found a place, and the house had we had bombed the hell out of Berlin. And as you remember, after World War II, the end was divided between the Russians, the East and the West.
Right.
Their zone through the center of the town and all that. But the top of my grandfather's house had been firebombed during World War II, and when we got there, it was still scarred on top. And that used to be the place where the maids, we used to have a maid and 2 cooks. Our maid, a woman who took care of me and my sister, and the cook, full time.
In your grandparents' house?
In my grandparents' house. And I never saw my mother or my father.
So who would you say was a big influence on you as a child?
Well, the big event, the life-changing event was I would go to school, grade school in Berlin. You go to while you go. It's from 6 to 5, 6, 7, 8, probably first 4 years. 6, 7, 8. And then you go to junior high school. And I went to junior high school as well. And at that time, then already Hitler Youth started. It was a fairly right-wing neighborhood, fairly well-to-do middle-class music.
Yeah, keep going.
It's all right.
That's a little background for
That's
you.
fine. And the big events there, I joined the Boy Scouts, and but I grew up in my grandfather's house, and we had a good view from the street, off the street. And I recall, for instance, seeing youth marching by with swastikas in the 30s.
And how was that explained to you as a child?
Oh, we knew already what it was. This was going to be a NG, no-go.
Right.
What happened to me that was a most momentous change, I have to go back one thing. We went back to Germany with my wife,
Right.
and the house is still there, exactly the way it was 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago, Victorian house, old. And I used to, the fence was still there, and there was still the mailbox that I used to climb over the fence because they wouldn't give me the key to open the gate, because there was a fence along the street. And that's how I got home, climbing over the fence. And I wouldn't have gotten in to see my old house where I grew up if it hadn't been for the people who owned it now, who was a businessman who had just come from a trip from some other country, and we met there and just accidentally opened up, and he showed us the whole house.
He's probably delighted to show you.
Yeah, there was really coincidences in life.
Right.
With how you married your wife, or how you married whatever army, or you survived. There's always just being here with you, Sharyn, is just great. So I mean, it's pretty damn unpredictable.
Well, let's go back to your childhood a little bit.
Yeah.
Was there a strong Jewish influence in your household, and if so, by who? Who?
Well, there was no Jewish influence whatsoever. Name is Simon and Co. Now my parents, but we celebrated Hanukkah and lit the candles. I remember that.
With your grandparents or with your parents?
With my grandparents.
Okay.
My parents did not live together.
Okay.
So my father
Was
lived in town,
was working, right?
which is like at
Okay.
that time probably almost an hour away,
Right.
in his father's house,
Okay.
which I visited every once in a while because it was near the zoo. It was wonderful. And
So you had Hanukkah with the
Cool.
grandparents.
so we had Hanukkah and Christmas. We celebrated Christmas, and Christmas was a lot more fun for me because we had a Christmas tree, a big Christmas tree, and my grandfather was a musician. Besides being a private banker, he had a violin, and he played quartet with his friends, not far from us, but I heard the violin a lot. And this violin, incidentally, was a Guarnieri violin worth thousands of dollars. And after World War II, we fought the Germans legally. We got lawyers to get compensated for the stealing my grandfather's violin. There was quite a long legal process to get reimbursed for the Nazis stealing my grandfather's violin.
And were you reimbursed?
Yes, we were.
Wow.
I think we got $3,000 for it. Probably was worth 30,000 for all you know. I mean, the Stradivarius or the Guarnieri, those are the two violins.
Okay.
And but I remember the whole. I used to listen. There was a dining room and a music room, and on Saturdays they'd play quartet. My mother would play the piano. There's a grand piano, and what I remember so well, and it was survived, was a bronze statue of Moses. It's a famous copy of Michelangelo, Moses, where he sits with about this tall. And I remember the most memorable Christmas was, we got a lot of Christmas presents, when they lit, I had to wait in the music, in the dining room. It was a dining room and then biparting doors into the music room. And I had to wait there from 6 to 7 till they had all the candles lit. And then they gave me a train. As a boy, it was nothing more wonderful than putting tracks together and having playing with the train. And the most memorable event was when the curtains caught fire from the candles that were behind at the window. I'll never forget that.
Of course not.
So but that's where I grew up, in that setting, and Hebrew, I didn't know one word of Hebrew.
So did you have a bar mitzvah? Probably not.
No, didn't have a bar mitzvah, and we were circumcised, however, when I don't recall.
Did you celebrate Passover?
Yes, I think we did.
Okay, so you did some of the Jewish
Yes,
holidays.
we did. We did Hanukkah and Passover and
Did you have Rosh
Christmas.
Hashanah or Yom Kippur?
I don't remember.
You don't remember,
But
okay.
I have a feeling
Right.
we did that, and a sort of had to do with meals, not. But the big event from my childhood, after all, I was only 8 or 9, was when that Christmas tree, because that's when I got all the presents. And
But did you know that you were Jew? I mean, did you feel any sort of Jewish identity?
no,
Okay.
the thing was that I had a nanny that I was very much in love with, and her name was Alice Hensel. She wasn't Jewish. And all I can tell you is that I was with her the day she died, when she was 91 in Switzerland. I mean, I saw her in the morning, she still saw me, and she played a much bigger role in my life than my mother. A very big role.
So let's move ahead a teeny bit. I know
That's my bio.
that's your bio, right?
Yeah, because she keeps showing up in my bio.
Well, she was very important to you in your life, obviously.
She was very important because I'm still in Germany. I haven't come to this
That's
country
fine.
yet.
Right. Now, that's fine.
So I must have been fairly difficult child in my growing up in that grandfather's house. And so they sent me into psychoanalysis, and as it turned out, I went to a psychoanalyst. I walked to see the psychoanalyst, one of the first Freudian analysts,
Right.
and she fled from, her name was Bornstein, and we even saw her later. Somehow we maintained contact after she fled from Germany. She survived.
Okay.
And I walked to go for my Sprechstunde, we call it, speaking for my psychoanalysis. And the most important piece of, I saw her after the war too, after World War II. But the important thing that I recall from that I would go in there quite a bit. It was an hour walk to get there, and I went there once a week.
Wow.
And
And how old were you approximately? Do you remember?
Yeah, I was probably 9.
So you're pretty young to be going
Oh,
to
yeah.
psychoanalysis, yeah.
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
I was one of the early. The records probably from her. The important thing that I remember most was when she made me the drawing to show me where I came from, where I was born. And she drew a thing like this, where it's a vagina, you come out of a vagina, and she made some kind of a drawing. I remember that she did that to explain to me where I came from. And
Did you understand why you were going there?
why?
Yeah, did you think you would
well,
misbehave?
that's
or?
an interesting issue. How did I get into the first record? Psychoanalysis was pretty
Brand new, it was brand new.
brand new idea, and I must have had all kinds of difficulties.
Okay.
And I went once a week. I remember walking there. I don't remember very much about it, but she obviously wrote everything down and probably published it, because I mean this was all new, psychoanalysis, and but I remember the walk there,
Okay.
which was 3/4 of an hour, long walk by myself.
Absolutely. Let's move ahead a teeny bit to when did things start turning
And
uncomfortable for your family?
well, the reason why I left Berlin was when I was 10 years old, when I was going to junior high school, and the junior high school that was the most memorable thing. I'm in the second grade then, first 2 years or 4 years probably. On the way back, I went with my bicycle from my grandfather's house. And on the way back, I wouldn't say that there was necessarily an anti-Semitic effort or they identified me as a Jew, but they could have. And so I'm riding my bicycle, and some guys behind me got in front of me, put a stick in my front wheel as I was cycling, and that changed my life. Why? Because the bike stops when your front wheel doesn't
Right.
keep, it stops as it goes, and I went over the top. And I didn't, I knew I had a problem, so I went, it was around 1 o'clock, with my teeth, and I had my second teeth. The baby teeth were gone, which, by the way, inheritance. My grandson has the same baby teeth I have, still today, down here. So the whole thing about how human beings could, and I just saw him a few weeks ago, and he's in California, how it was possible to have in that one cell transmit loss of baby teeth to a grandson who's from God. I mean, life is a miracle. I really, to me, the ultimate thing of how one cell can contain that kind of information.
Right.
Well, that's another subject.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So the bicycle incident changed
The
your life.
bicycle incident changed it in that when I got home, my mother wasn't home, but my grandfather called the dentist. And it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They took me to the dentist, and the dentist took out the nerve of my front tooth right here, and never forget that. And then they said, it's not safe for you to live here. So then I had, all my life, I had only half a tooth right in the front of my mouth. Even when my wife fell for me, I did not have a front tooth. And I didn't get my teeth fixed till after World War II.
Right.
That was really quite remarkable, but it changed my life. My mother decided, well, no more, you can't live here. It's too dangerous.
Did you understand that?
And, oh, well, that was obvious when they knocked me off the bike, and that was before, in 1931.
Right.
Before Hitler didn't assume power in April 33. 1st of January or April 1st, he became chancellor. This was quite a long time before.
So what did your parents do when they said you can't live here anymore?
Can't live there. It was just my mother knew a woman, had a friend who had heard of a country home school in southern Germany. And long story, I mean, I could go on and on, but the thing is, they decided to contact that school, could I go there? And that's where I wound up. They took me out of the public school immediately and sent me to southern Germany. It was a 12-hour, 10-hour train ride.
Did you go by yourself?
Well, not the first time, for sure. Second time, first time. Anyway, they put me in the school in southern Germany, in Herlingen, which is half an hour outside Ulm, which is the capital of Württemberg. And the principal of that school was Anna Essinger. Anna Essinger, who interestingly enough, her background was Jewish, but she had been to this country in 1898 with the Quakers, and she had very close connection with the Quakers, and she came back 20 years later to help out. Germany had lost the war, and she provided relief to the Germans who were suffering. Well, it's a long story who this person is, but she saved my life because April 1st, 1933, well, my folks sent me to this country home school in Herlingen. Now,
did your sister go too?
Well, that's
another story. Okay, let's focus on you then. Okay,
Yeah.
so you went to school.
I went there, and it was a very 12-hour ride, and had my own room that I shared with another boy, and I had photographs. I even have them in the bag here, what the school looked like. I took the 60-year-old photographs, and so on. And it was in Herlingen. Herlingen, it turned out to be where today that road was called Urban Rommelsteiger. Urban Rommel was Field Marshal Rommel, the big Nazi who took all of North Africa in a few weeks, and they changed the name. The Germans changed the name the street was on in his honor. And my sister, when they sent me, actually lived in the house that Rommel owned, that Field Marshal Rommel owned. But they'd taken it away from the Jews. They just confiscated it.
How long were you at the school?
So I was in that school for a year and a half, and then when Hitler decided all schools, private or public, had to honor the German Reich, they had to run up the swastika and she said, I'm not going to do it. Now, that kind of stuff takes guts. I am not going to have a school that has a swastika on a flagpole in front, on top of it. And I mean, this goes on and on, but the thing is, when she decided, that was April 1st. I mean, these are historically documented, the history of the Nazis.
Right.
So when she decided she could not run a school under the Nazis, and she told my parents that, and I don't know when that was.
Right.
This is in the middle of your school year in '33. She said two things. One was, I'm going to continue to, well, this was April 1st, Hitler assumed chancellorship. So by, is it too long now, getting to
No, you're absolutely wonderful. Continue.
well, I'll at least get us out of Germany. So she told my parents that if they wanted to, she was going to continue school for a few more months until about June, and then if you wanted to continue the school, in my school, it's a small school, you know, it's a boarding school where you had 12 boys, all different ages.
Right. Were they mostly Jewish boys or no, or mixed?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
No.
So what did she tell your parents she would do to help you?
The long story is
Yeah.
that she said, I'm going to close the school, you can stay there in the summer, but I'm going to go and move it to England. And because she had been with the Quakers in Philadelphia, and she had the connection with the Society of Friends, who later in my life too helped me a lot. So she said, if you want your kids, whoever wants to come with me, you're not going to lose one day of school. October 1st, we continue school in England, and I'll take care of you. And I don't know how the heck we paid for it and all, but when my parents decided, well, my father then, of course, already this overlaps now with my father's history, who I just saw. I have on his history. My father is very well known, and he, you read, I have his obit here. He worked for 60 years. He did the largest German Jewish paper in the world. He edited,
Right.
but he decided he had to get out, and he fled with a backpack over the border because the Nazis wouldn't give him a passport.
So your parents agreed to let her take you to England, is that correct?
Oh yeah. My life, yeah, they said, okay, well, they fled too.
Oh, they did flee. Now where did they
My
go?
father fled to Czechoslovakia
Okay.
with a backpack, and he had been wounded in World War I. He couldn't walk. My father only could have, he had a problem with, he was in an ambulance outfit or something, with his custom-made shoes all his life, boots. How he made it across the border into Czechoslovakia, avoiding the mountains there, hills, in '33 too. And then he published, he worked for, he didn't have any money, so then he became editor of a German paper in Prague that was only published on Mondays, and he became foreign correspondent for French papers, and then he published a Jewish monthly in Mukachevo. It was a 12-hour train ride, almost in Russia. And they only had one room, a bedroom, at 42, that's Czech. It's spelled Rimska, R-I-M-S-K-A, and 42 is 42, and I'll never forget that. Because in summer vacation, I'd come from England, 3 years to visit them. I had nowhere to go because school's closed in the summer. That's a whole, I mean, it's really a long story.
So where in England did you end up?
In England, you graduate from high school at age 16. Matriculate. So I was up in England. She had this Quaker, she had this manor house and where the older children lived. And then in about 2 months, they put up a barracks, like an army barracks, with maybe 14 rooms. And each room, each space, it was on concrete piles. They built that in about 8 weeks. And I got a room, my room was the second on the right, or third. It was, the way I figured, it was 8 foot long, and the width of the bed is 30 inches, and another 30, it was 5 feet or 6 foot wide, and I lived at that for 4 years.
How many children, or how many students were at this school?
14. Oh, how many total
Yeah, total
students?
in this group. Yeah.
Well, I don't know, 40?
40, okay.
But I mean all ages.
Right, so you lived there till you were 16?
Yeah, I went through my, 16.
And then where did you go?
Then it became a problem. Then became a problem. Everything, the school was closed to the summer.
Right.
So I had to go to Czechoslovakia to spend the summers. And so how old was I then? 34, I was 13, 14, 15, by myself, traveling all the way through Belgium. I mean, from England, you got to cross the channel, you go to Calais or Dover, from Calais to Dover, then you get a train ride to Berlin, 8 or 10 hours. My daughter and we slept in the luggage racks over the seats, and then I get off in Berlin, and I can't understand how I managed to be on my own at age 14, where the train stops downtown, how to take a streetcar with a bag and all that, and then, because you had to change trains, so if I wanted to spend the summer with my folks in Czechoslovakia, and I had to make that trip back and forth. That's really, I mean, it's really unbelievable today. If we think of our kids to confront that. The one part of the story that I like putting in my bio is in 1936. I don't know if that means anything to you. It does? What happened in 1936?
You're supposed to tell us.
Oh, well, the Olympics in Berlin. And all I can say is that the Nazis, Jesse Owens won the 100-meter dash, a black guy. All I can say is how I remember how nice the Germans were to us when we went to Berlin, and then when I went to Czechoslovakia on another train, that when we came back on the Olympics were over, they were nasty. And I'll never forget that. They knew we were Jewish or something, and their attitude to us was mean. I mean, it's just demanding. Passport, instead of, and we were sleeping 4 in the compartment, the benches. It's a long train ride.
Right.
And anyway.
Let's move ahead a little bit, because I know you're very well educated. Where did you get your advanced education? Were you still in England?
Then in England, then I graduated from the high school, and I had to go to London, and it was a 3-day exam, and I flunked it. twice, part of it. First day was 12 hours, and then 2 more days, morning and afternoon, at age 16. And I wasn't very good at chemistry or whatever. Maybe history was all right, but I didn't make it. And so you can't go on. In England, you graduate at 16, you graduated college at 20, and you were done. You're going to Cambridge and Oxford. So I couldn't go to college because I couldn't matriculate. I remember that well. So my mother came and they didn't know what to do then, and I was 16, and she went to the refugee committee in London, and that's the part about fate. On the way out of the committee, she signing me up and so on, like you would today if we have refugees. You know, there was a woman where you signed in someplace in an office building in London. And I don't remember whether I was with her or not. I might have been. But my mother said to her, what am I going to do next? I mean, no money, refugees, 16-year-old boy, and she still had a daughter too to take care of somehow. What on earth? So she said, this woman said to her, you know, my uncle could use an office boy. I think he could use an office boy. That's how I became an architect.
Oh my goodness.
Her uncle was an architect on 107 German Street, C.J. Etriel, and I wound up as the office boy. I made the tea for in the mornings. I took the drawings to the printers for printing on Regent Street. I ran all the errands, and I learned how to draft.
How long did you work there? He taught you, obviously. How long did you work there?
Not only did I find out how to make a drawing, sharpen a pencil and make a drawing, but I got there. I lived with Mrs. Critch. They put me in a boarding house in up in North London, which meant it was an hour trip to get down to Piccadilly.
Right.
Which is, funny thing is, when I went with my daughter now not long ago, the door was locked, but to this place, the house survived the bombing and war, and it's the same thing, the same number, same address, 107 German Street.
So how long
But
did you
I
do
went
this?
to night school.
Oh, you did?
And that's what saved my life too, because after working 8 hours, then to save a penny, I walked to London Polytechnic Institute for a night school course. And by the time I got home to eat, it was 10:30 at night, and Mrs. Christian made me dinner. I did that 2 nights a week. I took the London Polytechnic course in architecture. And to become an architect under those circumstances would be 8 years of night school.
Wow.
And Saturdays, we had to go to Kensington, outdoor sketching. I don't know how the hell I did it, how I saved the pennies, but I can still remember where the Poly is and where I walked at night, uphill, Piccadilly, and where to turn, and near the BBC was this London the Polytechnic Institute.
And how long did this take you? How many years was this?
2 years.
Just 2 years.
So then it was 1939. And my parents had fled Czechoslovakia, then from Czechoslovakia they went to France. And then they came to this country in 38, in the fall of 38. And my dad was working for a French newspaper, and I don't know how the hell they made it, and but
Did you come over here at that time with them?
no. So I was in
You
England,
were still
and
in
they were in
England, okay.
France, and they came here in 38, and I had finished 2 years of the night school,
Right.
and I had practiced in this architect's office, but then long story, they managed to get me a ticket for me and my sister to cross the Atlantic, but they didn't have any money. So the people who paid for my trip was actually on my mother's side, aunt and uncle, the people who were wealthy,
Right.
who owned the department stores in Berlin or Linen. They paid for our trip to this country, and then they helped us even here. And they had come a year earlier, refugees. And funny thing is, after the war, and the thing is, I think they got their department store back in Berlin, and so maybe just. But the thing is that I came to this country. I arrived the day the war started, September 1, 1939. And we were watching, and because the Germans had already defeated France, I mean, it was already over. I mean, they defeated Belgium and Holland, and it was all, and Rommel, and I remember coming across, we're looking out for submarines from the boat. And well, anyway, I got here September 1, and long story to end this thing, I was in school September 3rd in Brooklyn, an hour subway ride from where my folks had gotten a place to stay, an apartment, and the building wasn't even finished yet. And I did that for 3 years.
Was it architecture school also, or what?
Architecture school.
Right, because you had already gone to Polytech.
Pratt Institute.
Okay.
And Pratt, at that time, was not even authorized to give a bachelor.
Really?
No. But, and it was a long trip to get to Brooklyn, on Ryerson Street you go to Borough Hall and change and this, and then by the time you get home, and it was really pretty rough going. But I was the head of the class right away because, well, first of all, the one thing that's very interesting, the head of the school, it was an art school actually, Pratt, and engineering school primarily. And there was an old building, and an old factory converted, and so on. And it's really for poor people, but they had kids from Connecticut and Massachusetts.
And how did you end up in Stamford? How did you end up moving to Connecticut? Were you in New York for a long time, or no?
Yes. How do we?
When did you move to Stamford?
Yeah, no. Moved to Stamford in the 50s. No. Then I went to Pratt. I
Right.
got my certificate.
Right.
Then they had Conrad, Professor Whitman. He came from Germany. He was not Jewish. Gave us a course in camouflage, and the war had started. And that course in camouflage was very helpful. And then they drafted me. I was in the Army. 32908-438 was my serial number. And that was pretty scary.
What part of the service did you
And
serve?
so then they sent me to, they interviewed you, Fort Dix, New Jersey. For a whole month, I went to Fort Dix. And you go in there and you do this and that and the other, and you do KP one day, but they want you in the, they wanted me in the right place in the Army. And the guy didn't know, the interviewer didn't know what to do with me. And after 30 days, they gave up on me because I knew French, I knew German, my background, I had camouflage, I had drafting experience. I said, well, sorry, don't know what, you go in the infantry, fellas, that's it. So they sent me to Georgia on a troop transport, and I went to off Macon, Georgia, Camp Wheeler in Georgia, and then I did KP. I was nobody, and I learned how to shoot a rifle, an M1, a machine gun. I was scared shitless, and then you're a private in the Army, you're nothing, nothing. And then they transferred us to, from Georgia, went to Mississippi, training, and from Mississippi, one day they said, you're going to go to CAMA. What's CAMA? C-A-M-A. CAMA is California, Arizona Maneuver Areas. We're going on maneuvers. And when they tell you that, they say, uh-oh, we're at war with Japan. And they're sending you out to, we're going to go to Japan. In Arizona, we're not over 3,000 miles away. And Europe is. So then I wound up there, and what saved my life, I'm sure, many times I've had close calls. We're so close to San Diego, and I met this guy who was also German Jewish. We had a weekend pass outside LA, and when you have a pass in the Army and you're a private, you don't have a Jeep and a driver. You're not a lieutenant or colonel. Well, I'm on the road, 6 o'clock in the morning. I meet this guy. I can't tell you this whole story, but I went to see, the reason why I went to LA is because my nanny from Berlin lived in Hollywood, in North Hollywood, Laurel Canyon.
Oh my gosh.
And so this guy said to me, when you come back, and the colonel was very nice who ran the maneuvers there, Colonel King. And he said, when you come back, go and see the colonel Monday, but make sure you get there at 8 o'clock Monday morning. Now that's quite a trick from Hollywood to get out in the desert at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right, to go back.
At night. How do you do it? Just hitching.
Right.
All right. 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm there. And I never forget that. And he ran the maneuvers there. I don't know. So I said to him, never forget that. Colonel King, I met whatever his name was, and he said to come and see you because he thinks you're going to like me. And he liked me. What he liked was my experience in camouflage, drafting, architectural background, and of course well, that was enough already.
So what did he have you do?
So he said to me, well, the guy who sent you, did he tell you anything? That we're going to North Africa? No, sir, he didn't tell me anything. He said, well, I'll take you instead of him. I took his job. He was going to go, and after he sent me there, I don't know what happened to him, but obviously he got out of, he didn't know they were going to go to North Africa. He thought we headed for some fight on those damn islands with the Japanese. But I got his job, and Colonel King, I never saw that guy again, and Colonel King said, he didn't tell you, we're going to Europe. No, sir. Then Colonel King said, here's what I'll do for you. This was Monday morning, 8 o'clock. He said, I'd like you to say goodbye to your parents. And we're not leaving here till Friday. So I'd like you to go to New York and say goodbye. I said, sir, I have no money. I can't afford it. So I made it back, long story short, I made it back from the desert all the way to Laurel Canyon in North Hollywood to get the money from my nanny, who was doing the same, making a living just like my mother, giving massage treatments like my daughter still does today. It's in the family. So I went to North Hollywood. I got the money to get onto a plane to New York. At 10 o'clock in the morning, I was on an American Airlines flight out to New York City. I spent a week in New York. I was back on Friday morning, 8 a.m. in the desert and on the train all the way 3,000 miles to Orleans. We went to the town, it's in Algiers, it's at the tip of Africa, and you cross behind Gibraltar over, of course we didn't know a damn thing about it at the time, but that's how I got into the army seriously, because the colonel, I'm on this first 3,000 miles across country, then on the boat, and then I wound up in intelligence, and we went from North Africa, Oran, Casablanca, and then we got another troop ship, and you're again, crap, you're just a private in the army. The officers are up on top, and these were converted freighters. They emptied out the whole bottom of the freighter. It was a big bottom of a ship you never saw. You've never stood in front of a ship where there's nothing, a freighter, and then they put up part of it, 6 beds 12 inches apart on metal things for us to live in. And well, I think I talked enough. I think the thing is that we made it, what I never forget is the meals, and you take turns. They cook the meal or something, and then to get the garbage out of the bottom of a freighter, you have to carry it, get up a ladder on the side of a freighter and onto a deck. And once you're outside on the deck, with the leftover crap, you better get on the side the wind doesn't blow it back in your face. I remember that, being out there with that was, and then we landed. The end of the story is, I made it, we got to North Africa, took a train across to Casablanca. Casablanca, we went to Naples, then I was at Lago Averno, outside Naples for a month, and the World War II, Colonel King was there, and the thing was that the World War II, the Germans were, this is 1943, or 44 now, I don't know, 44. And we were fighting, the British 8th Army took the east side of Italy going north, and we took the west side. And I was with the 5th Army and General Mark Clark and the colonel, and I did the whole war from Naples all the way to the day I arrived in Milan, and I saw Mussolini hanging on a lamppost.
Well, I think that's a very appropriate time to end.
It is the end.
No, and you know what? Your stories is so interesting. This is going to be a part one because we haven't even gotten you to Stanford, and we haven't met your wife.
Stanford.
We haven't met your wife yet. Your beautiful wife. So, what is this book? Tell us that before we close. Oh my gosh, what is this book? What language is it?
It's German.
This is German. Oh my gosh, is it a childhood book?
Yeah.
Who gave you this book?
I got it in World War II.
In World War II. Did your parents give it
And
to you?
it's called, I don't know what the value is.
What's it called?
In German, it's gift pills. Gift is poison and pills is mushroom. Poison mushroom. And who's the poison mushroom?
The Jew.
The Jew.
The Jew. You see, it has a
Yeah.
Jewish star. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
This is my most
Oh.
historic book, that's why I bought it. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a lot of stuff in that bag, but other stuff. But this is about the Jews, how they
Propaganda.
slaughter animals and rape children.
Terrible. This is the kind of,
And this,
this was being spread throughout Germany when you were a child. Terrible.
I mean, this thing, I don't know what the value is. I'm leaving it in my, this is how the Jews came to us.
Yeah.
This is a book for children,
Terrible.
and here, that's a poison
Where's
pill.
the mushroom? A little boy's giving to a woman.
A nice German
A
girl.
pretty girl, yeah.
Yeah.
Terrible.
We,
Well, frankly, thank you so much for your time. But this is definitely part one. I think we would all agree.
and since it didn't get to Stanford. And
But we hope you enjoyed
Yeah.
speaking.
and of course, I love to talk. Yeah, it's 10 to 12, I guess.